Welcome to another Wisdom podcast. We have Michael Nicholson with us. He's a PhD. He's an economist, a diplomat, and an author. We're going to talk about his various travels and his insights about the economy out there with everything that's happening. Probably touch on actual events, Israel, Hamas, Ukraine, Russia, and so forth, and U.S. diplomacy and U.S. Sovereign diplomacy strategy. I'd always like to study that. This podcast is brought to you by podfire.com. If you want to start your own podcast, if you want to scale it and monetize it, come to me, baby. I've got something for you. You can go to podfire.com and I'll help you start your podcast, scale it to the sky, get sponsors, get paid while doing what you love. Podfire.com. Mike, welcome to the pod. Tell me a bit more about yourself and about what you're up to nowadays.
Sure, thanks. So right now at this moment, I'm in Washington, D.C. I've been studying Portuguese for the past 6 months or so, developing a decent professional fluency. I'm getting ready to move to Mozambique and work there for 4 years at the U.S. Embassy as a diplomat with USAID, U.S. Agency for International Development. So it is diplomacy, but the focus is on development, which is helping countries nurture their democracies or their economies.
Love it. So you've traveled to half a dozen countries in the last 20 years. What have you learned while being out there?
Oh, that's a good question. So I've learned that jet lag isn't that much fun, first of all, and there's different tricks to get through the trips. Uh, I've lived in 6 different countries. I've been to maybe a couple dozen more. Mainly, actually, I'll say in Africa. I not by intention, but I've become an Africa guy. I lived in Liberia and Kenya and Ghana and moving to Mozambique, and before that, Egypt, which is in Africa. Of course, a different part. Other countries were Armenia and Pakistan and the United Kingdom, just to flesh things out a bit. Uh, I mean, I'd like to say that what I have learned is that we're all the same, and I'd like to talk about the commonality of the human experience. But I'll tell you, I feel that that has to always come with the idea that, and I work in some of the poorest countries in the world, working with some of the poorest parts of those countries, and the world. I tend to face the problem of reconciling how different life experiences for people that are very poor and people who are not. And something I've learned is that we are all humans. It is the same planet, but wow, it can be such a different experience.
And how is it a different experience? I mean, their Maslow's hierarchy of need is not taken care of, quote unquote. So they don't have food security, they don't have shelter security, the hygiene is a problem. Um, how is that different precisely from, let's say, my reality with a roof over my head, water security, everything? And also, how is their world perception and their mentality different as well? If you could shine a light on that.
Sure. So I'm not going to pretend to be in somebody else's head and talk about someone's someone's thinking or feeling, but I can tell you what I've observed, and I'll put it in there's 2 big ways I'll describe it. One is that the harsher part is that if you don't have water, that's the only thing you're thinking about. If you're hungry, that seems to be the thing that's dominant. There are many people who die in childbirth, either the children or the mothers or both, for technologies that have been around for 1,000 years. They just haven't reached some of the areas on the planet. And at some level, it's a fundamental difference in how you approach the world. And also, this is, I think, not a small part of it either, is that the world can be very, very small. If you're living in a poor rural village, concepts like you had referenced Russia, Ukraine, concepts about wars on other continents. Not only does that not exist, but I've met a lot of people in Liberia who did not understand that the concept of Liberia, that they were that this country, that they had a group, they had a clan or a group or a chief, and that's what their existence was, and then everything else was sort of out there. That's a level of perspective that I can't really comprehend, of course. But the other side of it, I'll say, you mentioned Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? I saw and experienced circumstances where people who were, I would say, I describe their circumstances as being about the equivalent of 16th century European standards, rural areas where they, all the, nothing like indoor plumbing or heating outside of fires. And they sure seemed, frankly, I mean, they sure seemed happy to me, easygoing. People fall in love. People, love their parents. People have frustrations with their kids. The normal human stuff that has been going on for however many millions of years there's been people on the planet. As a reminder that even though we have these concepts of shelter or of, say, your social media presence, fundamentally, we all like to eat, we like to drink water, we like to fall in love.
So are we projecting or wide privileges on these people, like, oh, they should have that type of life, oh, they should not die? Are these people really looking for help? And then it's deeply philosophical question, but can you get out of your own hole if someone else is helping you? Because sometimes you get people out of a hole, but then they come back right in because that's all they know. So I asked like three questions and they're all deep ones. Start whichever direction you want to take.
Yeah, okay. I think I heard two, so let me answer two, and then maybe pull up the third. So the first one you talked about, I said, are we imposing, if I recall, if you're
Yeah,
imposing
is it like
white people's
imposing or
perspective?
quality of life on theirs? Do they really want to get out
Yeah,
of that lifestyle?
yeah. Well, first let me unpack the word white, because I don't think that's a small part of that question, especially when we're talking about working in Africa, where most of the people are black, and especially most of the impoverished population. Uh, I think it's a shorthand for a lot of things, and I think that it has validity to describe it as white problems or a white system. But I think that's things are more complicated than that. And so there's a book that came out when I was a graduate student by a former World Bank economist called "The White Man's Burden," which he's using a modern 20th century, 21st century snarky uh, title or ironic title about how I would describe it as imposing this new development space of creating market systems, say, on as similar to what people were talking about, say, 200 years ago when colonialism started and the burden of white people to bring civilization. Uh, I think it's not an unimportant idea, and that's something that we should be aware of. However, not everybody in development is white. Not everybody who's poor is non-white, and that there's something more going on. The phrase that I like is NORM. Oh no, sorry, weird. WEIRD. Western educated industrialized. Forget what the R stands for, but D is for development. And just it's a nice acronym, weird, because it's a reminder that most of the world's population is none of those things, right? So there's a mass of humanity that's not weird. They're, say, normal, but also they're not part of this whole. Given that, uh, it's a complicated question, and it's part of it. I like to say when I talk about development, especially as an act of U.S. foreign policy, which is what this is. We often tend to try to characterize, we here being, in this case, I'll be talking about people who defend development as U.S. foreign policy, tend to argue in many cases that it's a part of security and that there's a value to helping, which I 100% agree with, that there's a value in helping to create more stable environments in foreign countries, because the United States often has to be involved in some conflict areas if there isn't security. However, I also believe that there's a strong humanitarian impulse, and it's not just because we provide this this humanitarian assistance or this development assistance because we're out of our own interest, but we do it because the United States, we are the good guys, and it's the right thing to do, and that can be an end in itself. To go a little bit deeper, though, is this good? Is this what people want? And also, which is jumps to the other part of your question, is like, can that solve problems? And the answer is, man, I don't know, and I'm not 100% sold on that. And there's these trends that go through in development thinking, and the one we've had for the last 5 years, but it's always those sort of like repackaged ideas about self-reliance or working with local systems. And if it's not being asked for, then it probably shouldn't go there. And I think that there is this hurdle, especially people like myself who have this massive education that I'm and experience of a lot of countries over time that I'm bringing to places. And by the way, I'll close with this sort of vignette, which I quote a lot. People talk about don't teach a man to fish, or don't give a man a fish, teach him how to fish. And I like the response that, like, look, fishing's not that hard. And 100% anybody that I'm going to go and quote unquote try to teach how to fish, and that could be anything I'm trying to do, they already know how to do that better than I do. So what we should not be doing is thinking about trying to talk down to people and teaching them how to do things they already know how to do. There's some other answer out there. But I'll tell you, I don't think we know that answer yet, because if we did, we wouldn't be having these problems.
Right, and especially if that person didn't ask you for advice, that's pretty much on top of my rule book. When someone doesn't ask you for coaching or advice, you just don't give it to them. It's almost rude, because most people are like, yeah, I'm good, dude. I don't need your help. Um,
Nobody's
now
ever been at the gym, had somebody come over to correct their form and said, thanks, man. I really appreciate that.
Oh, yeah. Did that ever happen to me? It's like, no, I don't think so, but I'd look for the day when it will. Now, helping someone, like, I feel that humanity, like we've established ourselves as a dominant species. We have a brain, we know how to hunt, we know how to stay in groups. But that has brought comfort. And some people in medieval time that would not be here otherwise because of the laws of evolution, aka the folks that are a bit weaker, they're still here on this planet Earth, and we accept that, and that's fine. That's progressive. But I feel that there's a bunch of people in every society that society keeps feeding them. They don't add much to society in value, and we help them still and keep them alive, but they never get out of their own suffering and they don't get out of their own way, basically, whether it's genes, whether it's just the environment that is incredibly toxic and they stay into that. So can we really help people out of their pain and suffering?
Uh, well, the last one, sure, we can help people out of their pain and suffering. But I feel that there were leading into that. You were talking about people who are living off entirely dependent on a system or dependent on what a handout or other things. And is it possible to structure things to pull? Maybe I'll ask you what is it? What is the question about that? Is it that is
Is
this a
it
problem that can be
possible? Because
solved?
like in Quebec, Canada, there's a bunch of people, we call them BS, Um, basically they just take check after check and they blow it on alcohol and uh bags of chips, like in a TV, and they just hang out there pretty much a full day, and that's their full lives. Everything is paid for them. They take from society. So they don't give much back, they just live their own life. So is that even a solution, or should sometimes we teach people to do stuff, or teach them discomfort and to pursue something that's worthwhile? I mean, we don't start from all the same place, right? But I'm just I have my concerns when it comes to socialism and especially charity, when it comes to giving to people. Like in my case, right, I really developed this warrior's mindset that even if I would be paraplegic or have cancer or have horrible things happen to me, I would still survive and thrive, or at least try to, right? And I wouldn't want much help from any types of governments. I've built a network around myself. I've built some value for people. I added value to some folks, and then yes, sometimes I ask them to add value back to me, but that's because I added value first, right? So I'm just not sure about the helping hand system out there. And even if that's just like a PR stunt to help out people, to look like the good guys, and if that can even weaken an economy or a country instead of helping it.
Sure. Okay. So I feel that talking about this notion of dependency, there might be two things that separate things. One is a person or a group of persons' natural disposition to not want to work and not have the mentality to go and accomplish things, linked with a system that's maybe this Canadian Quebecois system that creates incentives for people to do just that. And that seems like an unhappy cycle. But I want to be careful though that this is a different theme than what we're doing in development and international development when we're working in some of these countries in Africa, and among other places. I say Africa because that's where I've been working. What's definitely not going on in most cases, unless it's a disaster or humanitarian crisis, is anything close to handouts. We work with systems, we work with groups of people, we work with host governments and local organizations to help resolve systems. And so, but here, I think that I can give an example that might be more the universal. One thing that used to happen, say 20 years ago, is that you go to a community and you'd have a situation where there was, I don't know, a training on, say, a new agricultural practice. So it's a common thing we do. And they would actually do what they would call sitting fees, where because there's a value in getting more people that show up, people would show up and they would, maybe get a lunch, but also get paid to attend the training. And I'm pausing there for a second to go to emphasize that we've gone 180 degrees from that. We certainly don't pay for people to attend trainings, or we shouldn't. But I think based on the same concept that you're bringing up, if somebody's not willing to put skin in the game, then it's, first of all, it's going to be ineffective training, right? But second of all, this idea that I'm going to use this in a good way. There's a transactional approach here that somebody's paying or doing something, making some sacrificing, making some effort on their part in order to receive some of the benefits. And even if it's heavily subsidized, say, there's still this role there. And the key word here that we use to describe this is that we're looking to do things that are sustainable, and sustainable in the sense that at some point, this extra system, this public money will go away. The system that we're looking for will be in place that once it's gone, the system will continue. And that can't continue if you're doing handouts.
Right. I just think, okay, many thoughts again here. It's like a waterfall of thoughts. Well, I think that empathy has gone too far nowadays. It's like, oh, poor you, or oh, I understand you. But that's the problem again. And I'm gonna use the word white here, but like if I'm a white guy trying to understand an African guy, it's almost impossible, like we have for quality standards, we have like ways that we've been taught, and it's really it's hard for me to show even tough love to an African dude that doesn't have nothing and never had my education and so forth, So that makes it sort of hard, but still, I feel that we should go win-win. Like if I would at least tribe stuff on my end would be entrepreneurship based, so to teach entrepreneurship stuff.
Mhm.
And I'm pretty sure that this dude would add value to me one day, whether it's short term or long term. And I don't have any expectations with that because I'm abundant. But yeah, definitely. And just one last thought again, sort of against what I said. I think if I can try to think and be naive enough to try to put myself in the shoes of someone from Africa or in like an unfortunate situation, it's incredibly hard to get out of that hole at first, I think. And second, there's so much traps that can potentially have you fall back on to zero or square one that it makes it very statistically unlikely that they can get out of that hole. And that's where the quote unquote help or win-win partnerships can be useful. What do you think about that?
Nice. So I think I've got two-part in response. The first is that the last thing you're talking about all these traps people fall into. I used the word sustainable before. The other word that's real hot, the trend in my field right now, is resilience. And resilience is specifically trying to develop not just to create a space where somebody's going to be successful, but the space where when bad things happen, and they always do, that they're able to recover from those shocks, whether they're economic or a family member dies or there's a flood, right? Things like that. A war shows up, right? There's a lot of war showing up. That's what we went by resilience. So one thing we're doing is not just trying to create a space where someone's got enough money to buy a home, but a lifestyle or say a community where if something happens to that home, they'll be able to get through. I feel like that's in terms of like all the setbacks can throw people back, those traps. That's a real big idea in development right now. In terms though of the compare and say a rich white guy to a not rich black dude in Africa. Uh, I I'll tell you a little bit about I lived in Kenya in Nairobi for about 4 years, and I have felt when I was living in Nairobi, it's this fabulous city. It's huge, it's bustling. There's a lot of activities, draws in a lot of foreigners. Like there's a nice statistic about how I don't know it exactly, so I'm not going to just throw it out. But a friend of mine was a really highly successful entrepreneur there, and he would talk about how there's the same ratio of foreigners who have been successful immigrants, successful in Silicon Valley, founding major firms there. You got that same kind of energy in Nairobi where people come in from all around the world to try and take part in this VC culture. Uh, Delving deeper into that, though, there's this whole group of people. They're generally very poor. They're generally very uneducated. They're generally, frankly, very male. But they call themselves hustlers, and it was an impressive self-distinction. And the idea is like they're out there hustling, not in the sense of I'm trying to play, I don't know, trying to find a way to sneak by. It's to find a way to maintain a lifestyle by doing what needs to be done when you wake up in the morning to find the money to get, take care of your family or take care of yourself or to buy a home or whatever it takes. This idea of hustling is this really, really strong and potent entrepreneurial energy. And I'll tell you, it's an abundance in Nairobi. It's impressively there.
And is it a true mindset or a real framework that you can fall back to square one? What would that mean? Like, what would be these traps, and what would falling back to square one means? Are we talking about a hustler just hustling too much and I don't know, like getting sick or getting into trouble with the local mafia? Like, what does falling to square zero or square one back again means? And is it even a real thing?
I think that could be a really general case. So anytime somebody's trying to do something, scrapping together some money, in any case, anyone who's just trying to get above some sort of level to get money, food for their family or some money to buy to get their car fixed or something, and you get some hit. There's a health issue, or your car gets into a wreck. You need to repair your truck. Uh, Anytime there's some sort of economic or social or some other thing that happens, knocks you back. This is where maybe resilience with the lowercase r, not the big concept, but just like, we all go through life and bad things happen and you got to get up and recover from them. If you're lucky, if you're good, if you're strong, you come out of it better or tougher, or at least wiser from the experience. Sometimes though, it's enough of a hit. It knocks people down. And these are more generic statements. I think if I were to talk about the specific impact in Nairobi, with some of these guys, and I'm thinking about some cases that I know, it gets hard. I mean, because the choices, just to maybe close about one of the things that we would try to do in development is that it's not so much a case of creating a space where somebody's going to be successful. It's that the opportunities are there. So like you can have a lot of energy, you can have a lot of ideas, you can have a lot of hard work, but if you don't have the opportunities, then it might not lead to much. But if you can create this environment, we like to talk about the ecosystem of entrepreneurialism or ecosystem of small businesses. If there's a space for people to be successful, that might provide the sort of promise or the pride of opportunity that will help people develop sort of their own personal lowercase r resilience when they do face these setbacks.
Well, Michael, thank you for today. Thank you for this conversation. Where can people find out more about you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn and I'm on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter at Dr. _Nicholson.